Okay, and good evening. This is Peace and Justice Connections. And this is Bruce Giudici along with Kathy Mathis and Max Heineman. We're talking about single payer this evening because it is June and it is getting to be time when some of these decisions are being made. And there was just a large Democratic convention this last weekend that we're discussing people's positions on all sorts of topics. And one of them was on Medicare for All and about how strict or how strongly people are going to be working on that issue. And so it goes without saying that we are all in for trying to make that happen in this community, in this state, and this nation. So anyway, welcome. Do we have
Hello.
any? I have some, we just have a new connections that we just put out talking about Medicare for All. I can discuss that, or if you wanted to, if you had any other topics you want to kick off with.
Not particularly kick off with,
Okay.
but I had forgotten about the program tonight.
Oh, no.
And I was busy writing a response to a letter to the editor that was in the record.
Oh, yes? Topical?
Yes, it was
Was
definitely.
it about Medicare for All or about
Yes,
single payer?
definitely was. It was a
Okay.
kind of there was a letter that was kind of anti-Medicare for All,
Uh-huh.
and I was responding to some of the gross errors in the letter,
Okay.
and so that's I'm working on that.
Okay, very good.
Didn't get it finished,
Do we
but
want
I
to give
can.
them an airing or not?
Oh yeah, well, kind of. One of the things is they start out by criticizing it is the Democrat socialism, socialistic something, is taking a wrecking ball to the American healthcare, the finest healthcare in the world.
Yes.
And I mean, I have to
Yeah.
I have to take exception of that statement in several ways.
Yes, because, yeah.
It isn't
Well, the
fun.
wrecking ball part. You know.
The whole thing, the wrecking ball and the.
I can't say I
the-
particularly
Yeah.
disagree.
Well, that's what it says here. And
But talking about the finest healthcare in the world, is that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
that's
claim
a
is?
premise. Yeah.
yeah, and I
always a
actually
premise.
I
That's
looked it up.
definitely been debunked.
Depending on where you look, the what was it? I wrote it down. The United States healthcare is like 37th out of 187 countries. Yeah, and
Yet paying top dollar for every.
and well, the only thing we're best we are down on almost everything except the amount of money or the percent of GDP that we spend on healthcare.
Yes, we
we're the
spend
top.
the most.
We're the top of the list there.
We're number one.
And it was kind of interesting, though, when you looked at that. Generally speaking, England is kind of down a ways and so on. And I looked at this one, and England was at the top. And I thought, well, that's strange. I wonder why that. But then I figure, I don't know, I didn't really explore it too much. But I think it's because, depending on how you weight the different parts of that, England spends less of their GDP for health care than, Switzerland quite often comes out as having near the top the best health care.
Yeah.
But they spend much more of their GDP. It is good health care.
Yeah.
It's,
It's a little bit more expensive, but nothing like ours. So I was just hearing on I don't know, some NPR station or something about Trump is visiting England today,
Yeah.
and they were talking about, well, this would be a fine opportunity for us to get some sort of bilateral trade deal with England. And or with with the United Kingdom in general, and so, but they said that one of the sticking points that these people who were protesting that concept is that what Trump would want to do is he would want to negotiate some change to the national health system over in England and allow more access of of what we have to offer to England. And it's like this commentator was saying, well, at best it would take 4 or 5 years to negotiate some sort of agreement, but the whole idea of taking away or messing around with the national health system, given vis-a-vis what the American health system has, England would not be super interested in doing that. And so that's interesting. I mean, these trade deals that United States is talking about, we sort of have to trade things that people want. like soybeans or like pork or something, or or microchips. But I would say our healthcare system
not
is
health
not
insurance,
something.
yeah,
and
no.
that's not something health insurance.
Nobody wants our
Yeah,
health
well,
insurance.
in this letter to the editor, this person wrote, said that in England and Canada they have intolerable waiting times.
Mm.
And actually, I had researched the wait times in Canada a couple of years ago.
Sure.
And they do have wait times.
Yeah.
But it varies from province to province, and British Columbia being the worst, which is the one immediately north of us.
Right.
But they keep track of that. That is tracked, and there are annual results and what their goals are. So they are looking at that, and they're looking at reducing wait times. But even that said, their wait times are, generally speaking, not that much longer than what you might wait to get your insurance company to approve some major service,
Right.
or for your insurance company to refer you to a specialist, especially a mental health specialist.
Right.
That
Right.
just
Yeah. The comparison quite often is saying, well, obviously those people have to wait, whereas in this country, there's no waiting time at all. There's no line at all. I mean, you can get whatever you want whenever you want. It's just like going to McDonald's for your appendectomy or something. Well, maybe from appendectomy you would, but something that might be a little bit more,
a little less acute.
yeah, like a knee replacement.
Yeah.
Something like that may have the same wait time. And would definitely cost less in another country. I know some people who went to India to get, they paid for a vacation, and it was much less expensive for them to go to India to get their knee replaced.
if you want
than
to do
have it
that
done
on your
here.
vacation.
If you
Well,
want to do that.
it's a huge industry. It's called medical tourism.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, for one thing, we steal away doctors from these less developed countries by paying them outrageous amounts compared to what they're making in their other country. And for the folks, and then we have to.
Then we send
Then
patients
we
over
send
there.
patients
yeah,
over there
to take
well,
up their beds.
or
yeah.
then not. I don't know if it's really a referral. It's more like, they like this medical tourism. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
no,
it's some
these
sort
are
of-
these are all voluntary. But yeah, there
Yeah.
are travel agents who specialize in it. There are hospitals that cater to U.S. and other Western,
Yeah.
mostly U.S.
Yeah.
There are those in
Citizens.
Thailand, really concierge upscale places,
Thailand.
and you can recover on the beach in a
Yeah.
tropical,
Yeah,
paradise.
sounds good. Like I want to get
Yeah.
sick or something.
Yeah.
Well, it's it's less expensive for people who even have Medicare sometimes to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Unsettling to think about.
And the thing
Yeah.
is that the argument is, well, we can't do anything because the system we have is just too complicated and too difficult to change.
Oh yeah, that was another thing.
You know-
we can't change that. And see, I don't. It would be upsetting to change. I mean, there would be a lot of change involved. But we already have Medicare.
Yeah.
It isn't like we have to totally reinvent the idea. The basic framework exists
Right.
throughout the country.
Right.
And what we would be doing would be expanding the number of people, and it wouldn't be just certain categories that would be eligible. Everybody would be eligible.
Yeah.
You wouldn't when you walked into the doctor's office, they wouldn't have to check.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like changing the cars that we drive on the ground with cars that fly.
Yeah.
I mean, or flying in drones. It's more like changing from a gas-powered car to a electric-powered car. I mean, all the rules are the same. The roads are the same. Everything is the same except for the way that
The medical treatment is the same.
Yeah, it's the only thing that is different is
The
the
pay.
way that it's the way that
Where the
things are done.
money's going,
Where the
yeah.
money goes.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
But
And
the-
that was another thing. They said, well, it would cost about $32 trillion over 10 years. Well, that is true, and maybe even a little more than that.
Yeah.
But I did compute, if I can find it here, that actually if we continued the same,
The same path we have now.
the same medical system we have now, 10 years from now, that's going to cost over that amount, well over that amount.
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
that's actually a
Yeah.
savings.
Yeah,
Yes.
there is a savings.
It's
Yeah.
about a 19% savings.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
I mean,
So
which is pretty
numbers
significant.
are all relative.
They're all
Yes.
relative, yeah,
Yeah.
and the key thing is that reporting all of the numbers, not just saying one side of it is saying, well, there'd be huge wait times with this other system, ignoring the fact that there are huge wait times with our current system, and this is going to cost a ton of money over 10 years, ignoring the fact that we're paying even more of a ton of money
Yeah.
with the current system.
Yeah.
I mean, if you explain half the story, I guess you can convince some people that somehow it's a winner. But no other country is going to trade their system of medical care for ours.
No.
That was sort of one of the tactics of when they were talking about increasing military spending, is because the Russians are just getting so out of hand, they're just getting so big and powerful. I said, well, would you trade our arsenal for the Russian arsenal? Well, of course not. Well, then it's not comparable, is it? I mean, the thing is the only way that you would have some sort of equitable exchange is if they were equal, and they're not. So we have to definitely call people out every time we see that stuff, because right now it is topical. I mean, I don't know.
It's hugely topical.
Yeah. Did
right
you
now.
did
It's
you
ridiculous.
check out the Democratic convention the last couple days? I guess there were like 14 of the 23 candidates who were speaking, the presidential folks.
Yeah, and the guy from Maryland, I think his name starts with an H.
Oh.
It's just one of the people you've never heard of who's
Sure,
running.
yeah.
Who's throwing his hat in the ring.
Yeah.
He doesn't think we should be as radical as to ask for single payer.
I see.
I think he got booed off the stage.
Yeah. He was talking. He was speaking in California, in
That's
San Francisco.
In
unfortunate.
San Francisco.
Yeah,
Yes.
unfortunately, there's some places that's going to go over.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not saying that there aren't, but I'm glad to hear that in the California Democratic Party it
Yeah.
didn't go well.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that's a start. I mean, the thing is that 4 or 5, and before Bernie ran last time, I mean, Medicare for All was a sort of a laugh line. People say, oh yeah, right, in this country. But I think
Yes.
people are starting to warm up to the
Right.
fact that it's possible.
So apparently Bernie spoke, and the tagline for his speech was "No middle ground," and that line has gone viral.
No middle ground.
No middle ground.
Yeah. It's there's I think we've started at the middle so many times and moved to the right every time that we've gotten really far away from our objective.
Well, in this
yeah.
particular case, you can't go halfway with a single payer plan and get anything like the savings or the
Right.
equitable
You don't get the savings,
care.
particularly.
Yeah, the savings in particular, you have to have a single payer. Everybody has to be in
Yeah.
the same pool.
Yeah, I was reading in my recent Connections issue on page 4, which path to national improved medical care for all, and what this person, Margaret Flowers, who's a doctor and is pretty well knowledgeable on single payer stuff.
She's
was
well known in our movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, been arrested back at the beginning of the ACA. She managed to get arrested a few
Wow.
times.
Yeah. She's very articulate and knows this issue backwards and forwards. And she was talking about in this article about state efforts for universal health care, and asked, that being, a lot of people think that really it should be up to the states to take this on state by state by state, because then that's the way you can test it out and make
Yeah, we'll
certain
be
that it's
the
working, and that sort of
laboratories,
and that sort of thing. And this article pretty much debunks that and
Oh,
says
good.
that
Good for
and,
her.
yeah, it says that really there's a lot of reasons why there are barriers to state single payer, and the reasons why it won't succeed. And one of the major reasons are there are federal health plans. There are just barriers in front of just about anybody who would want to put together a state single payer system. And the three things that she has here is the federal health plans, like say VA or Medicaid, Medicare, and Indian Health Service systems, and says it's not possible to merge all these programs into a single state system, because a lot of these things are nationwide, and it would be difficult to dovetail them into or try to figure out the interactions between the state and the federal things. Then Medicaid as well. Medicaid is a federal program for people with low incomes administered at the state level. A state would have to apply for a waiver to incorporate Medicaid into its new state's program. There is greater flexibility for a state to do this than there is for Medicare. States would still have to track how many people qualify for Medicaid to be reimbursed for them by the
Right.
federal government. Another administrative task that adds cost, as well we know in terms of
I
jumping
can
through
speak
these
to
hoops.
that. Not the last legislation that was anticipated for California for single payer, but the one before that.
Yeah.
I read the plan, and then they had this thing in there about doing a means test.
Yeah.
I'm going, what do you mean doing a means test?
Yeah.
That's the reason we're doing this, so we don't have to do a means test.
Yeah.
But they did have to do a means test, even though you would get the same single payer
Right.
as everybody else in the state. But they do that to get the money back from the federal government
Medicaid.
for Medicaid.
We call Medi-Cal here, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that barrier. And the single-payer advocates have opposed turning Medicaid into a block grant program because that would limit funds during periods of recession when more people qualify for Medicaid. Because block grants, if monies were block granted to the states, then the states could just take that money and integrate it into their single-payer system. But in times of recession, like she's saying, those are the first things to go. I mean, you keep all other spending but the block grants are the first things to go. And then
It
they
gives me
also
a headache just thinking about it.
really. And then they talk about employer health plans. Employee benefits are protected under a federal law, the Employee Retirement
ERISA.
ERISA, right.
ERISA.
Of 1974. While states have the authority to regulate health insurers that operate in their state, they do not have authority to regulate plans offered by businesses that self-insure, which is 60% of businesses that provide health benefits. Any interference in employee benefits can be challenged under ERISA and would result in lengthy and expensive court battle. So there's a few reasons that states who want to put together a single payer system cannot fight these barriers because they're almost as bureaucratic as the system that we have now.
You can't integrate them.
Right.
They're difficult. They could. There was a hearing on the most recent California plan for single payer, and that was one of the major blocks. How you were going to get past that,
Yeah.
and the legislature had a hearing. You remember they have those hearings? They had a big show hearing in Sacramento. Well, the day or two before that, they had the real hearing in Sacramento, and they had experts. The ERISA expert was from Missouri. She flew in, and they had, and she talked about how you could get an exemption from the federal government for the ERISA, but it probably would be fought by unions,
Right.
which have long.
Well, they've long fought for these benefits that
Yeah.
benefit their people. And also, the thing is getting a federal waiver these days for California or for any state who want to do anything with respect to expanding health care. That's not going to happen. I mean, these are the folks who want to shut down the Affordable Care Act and leave nothing in its place.
Yeah.
So, it's so. Dr. Flowers finishes off by saying advocates for a single payer at the state level often say state efforts will help national efforts. Some advocates work for reform at the state level because they believe the public will be more inspired to fight for change at the local than at the national level. And it says here that it is true that it is often easier to engage people around local or state efforts. They feel more winnable. But what happens when public is told they are working for a state-based single payer, and then they find out that they have been misled because the goal is not possible? So the thing is, you work really hard for this single payer system in California, and then you come up against these very roadblocks that she lists out here in terms of the federal health plans, the Medicaid, and the employer health plans under ERISA, and you have this stuff. So yeah, it's great that you spent all this time and effort on a political plan and then get shot down in flames. It's much better to rather, to what she's saying, it's much better to fight for a national winnable
Right.
campaign
Oh,
than to try to fight these small little fires in Vermont or Colorado or wherever, and then find out and then get people discouraged when they find out they can't get what they were.
Well, it's definitely better to have a national plan if you can possibly get it.
Right.
We got into doing the state plans because we couldn't seem to get anybody
Right.
or enough people or enough state
Awareness.
There was Vermont and
And
California
Colorado,
and maybe Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado had something. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
the-
so-
The article that I've pulled up is from the Journal of the American Medical Association, so JAMA,
Mhm.
and it's by Steffi Wohlhandler and David Himmelstein, and they have a comment toward the end of their article saying that single-payer reform would be best done at the federal level. Without federal waivers, state-based reforms cannot redirect federal and employer spending through the single-payer system, compromising the administrative savings needed to make expanded care affordable, a problem that bedeviled Vermont's reform
Right.
effort.
Right.
Same thing.
Exactly the same thing.
So
Yeah.
the one time I think that it actually sounded like it might be workable was what I heard about the proposed New York plan about a year ago, and that was that they would do a double payer system, that the state plan would make up for anything any federal plan would not make up for. There would be no other plans, however, there would be no employer-based plans. There would be no private plans.
Yeah.
There would either be federal plans or state plans. So people who had some federal insurance could utilize that, and if they needed care beyond what their federal insurance would cover, the state would make it up. If people had no federal insurance, the state would pay for all of it. So that was about the simplest, most sensible way of doing a state-based plan in my mind.
Yeah.
But still, you do have some other systems, and I don't think there's any proposal to dismantle those systems like the VA or the
No.
Indian Health Services. But that would all be kind of part of the global budget that's all paid for by the
Right.
federal government.
Yeah.
They would just get their allocation.
Right.
But when you start saying, well, a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and when how much of your care is coming from that pot and that pot and
Yeah.
that pot, all of a sudden you've got this huge bureaucracy that's got
Yeah.
to
I mean,
make phone calls and sign things off in triplicate and send them through the computer.
You would
and,
think that at this
know.
point people are tired of bureaucracies and being, shunted from one pharmacy that takes your coverage to the next that doesn't take your coverage to another one that
Right,
does take your
right.
coverage, or finding a specialist that find out that your hospital no longer accepts your insurance any longer, and then you have to go someplace else. And why would we want to jump into another frying pan of that sort of
Right.
bureaucracy? I'm sure there are people who could work it out, just like there have been people who've been able to figure out what our current healthcare system is. But if you've ever tried to figure out the price of a drug, just what does the drug cost? I remember when I worked at MAC, it was like looking at this drug, and it was like, one pharmacy would charge a certain amount, another would charge like twice or three times as much. When it came time to replenish it, it was a third price. It's like, why are the drug prices jumping all over the place? Well, it's supply and demand. It's like,
No.
supply and demand.
No,
I don't think
there's more
so.
to it
No,
than
there's
that, yeah.
payola involved.
There's payola. There's right now there's a huge consolidation of drug manufacturers, and they're all leaving the country. Almost all of our drugs are being made outside of the
Yeah.
U.S. right now.
Well,
But we can't buy Canadian manufactured
Yeah.
drugs. We can only get them from China.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, and the United
Because we
States,
can't trust the Canadians.
well, yeah, we trust the corporations that have shipped all of our jobs overseas. I saw that manufacturing is a 10-year low for the country, and a lot of that manufacturing, people blame China for doing all this an export or taking all of our jobs. But really, it's the large corporations that are based here that have made a conscious decision to produce overseas because their labor is cheaper, their environmental rules are cheaper,
and
a lot of times
unions,
those pesky unions, and the quality controls aren't as strong.
Right.
And so the thing is that people are moving overseas because hey, there's profit to be made, and I guess it's just too darn expensive to produce in the United States.
In this letter to the editor, one of his complaints was that the insurance companies employ 500,000 individuals who would get laid off.
I see.
And that's true.
Yeah.
However, that would free 500, and he's saying they generate $1 trillion in revenue. And yeah, that's probably also true. But if they weren't working for the insurance company, doing things to make getting health care difficult,
denying care,
right? That they would be free
to do something productive,
to do meaningful work, which would increase the tax base.
That's right. I mean, how many times? How many times have these conservative people said, "Oh yes, we're going to pay somebody to do something that's totally, totally worthless"? I mean, why would somebody want to spend their life doing something that is superfluous or something that is really actively counter what you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that those folks, if they were given the opportunity, would want to work in something that's a lot more meaningful and something that's better for society.
And I think most of the proposed legislation for single payer takes into account I think the current one, J. Paul, that legislation provides for 2 years of up to 2 years of income until they get another job, and it provides for retraining, and also provides for those who guaranteed vested retirements. Is part of that.
I mean,
well, not just that. It also provides for purchasing or compensating the people who actually own these for-profit industries, the hospital owners and the insurance companies. I mean, it's extremely generous to people. I don't think it needs to be generous.
And the thing is the argument that we have to have an insurance company, an insurance system in place in order to employ people doing work that is not useful. I mean, that's like saying,
driving us nuts.
Yeah, well, it's like, let's start using those bombs so we can, let's start a war so we can keep those military active, because, we don't want to have any unemployment in the military, and we want to make certain that we're building more bombs on the line, or let's keep on polluting because, those people who are polluting our rivers and streams, they need jobs, and so we have... it's just...
No, you get a lot of argument about that when there's any kind of a suggestion that we should decrease military buildup. Well, but we all, every congressional district has, a base, and it has, contractors.
And yet we don't have a recycling industry in this country to the point where we are shipping all of our recyclables overseas like as garbage, and no country is going to receive them any longer. And I think Thailand or Malaysia was the most, or maybe Singapore was the most recent to kick back. I think Philippines as well kicked back some of Canada's garbage. Is that we're shipping our cardboard, or we're shipping our plastics, shipping our...
Thanks, we have enough plastic.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that why can't we, the innovative Americans, come up with a recycling industry that can employ some of these 500,000 people who would, then get these resources back into our economy. There's just no lack of things that can be done here. It's just that they are different things that what we have been doing.
Right.
Yeah. This is Bruce Giudici with Max Heineman and Kathy Mathis. We're talking about single payer. Sort of got off.
Well, I think the biggest hurdle we're going to have is what they call loss aversion. Even if the promise of something to come is much better than what you have right now, the worry that you're going to lose what you have is so concerning. And I, as a person who I call myself a bird in the hand person, I really, I try really hard not to make decisions I try not to let go of things that I have in the hope that something else will come along. But we're gonna have to do that as a people.
The thing
we're gonna
is,
have to we're gonna have to let go of our really crappy health insurance,
but what Max
our
is
high
saying
deductibles.
this transition can be easy. I mean, the thing is like I think what Bernie's plan is like every year or something we make people 5 years younger eligible for Medicare. I mean, there are ways to transition into a system that isn't going to just kick people out in the street on day one.
Oh, I know, but the scare tactics that are used by the opposition are, you're going to take away people's health care. And they keep saying this, that everybody who has employer-based health care is so crazy about it.
Oh,
No.
yeah.
And they're I mean,
I don't know who they're talking to.
I don't either. But I think the studies are actually beginning to debunk that.
Well, I think
that theory.
what they're talking about is they're talking to people who are so horribly afraid of losing what little they have.
Well, there you go, the loss aversion
right
thing.
is that oh God, don't let, I mean, it's like you're holding on to this lifeboat that is like
taking in water.
Yeah, taking in water, and it's losing air, and you say, oh God,
it's all I've
this is
got.
all I got.
Yeah.
And they have worked to get themselves in a job that provides that. They may not like the job they're doing, but they're there primarily to get the health insurance.
Yeah, there's
and if that's been your primary goal, then the thought of, oh, well, I'm not going to get my health insurance there anymore, and they know what terrible time they had getting it.
Yeah.
It's just terribly frightening to let go of that for
unless
some
there's
unknown.
something else that you
Some
can
unknown.
hold on to.
Yeah.
And that has to be made very clear. I mean, and there are just so many moneyed interests out there who are trying to convince you that there is going to be nothing
There's
there
going to
when
be
you let
nothing
go.
there, yeah.
They want to ensure that, oh my God, it is going to be horrible. I mean, you're
You're waiting a long time now.
Yeah.
You think you're paying high deductibles now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think it's hard to find a doctor now.
Yeah. Here, but the reality of it is that another article in this wonderful Connections here, page 5, that the majority of working age Americans, about 156 million people, have health coverage through a union or an employer, but most pay at least a portion of the premium themselves. Even with employer coverage, 4 in 10 workers report trouble paying unexpected medical bills or covering deductibles, co-pays, or other out-of-pocket costs. The survey reveals that health coverage we often associate with full-time employment is not always enough to protect working families from overwhelming health care costs. And so the thing is, what they have from 2008 to 2018, premiums for employer-sponsored insurance plan increased by 55%, growing twice as fast as workers' wages. That's in the 10-year period, so it's about 5% a year, and I can attest to that. That's about right. The size of average deductibles also ballooned by an alarming 212%.
Oh, yeah.
So that means you're paying, and not only are you having to pay more for your premium, but once you do pay for your premium, you don't get to use that insurance until you've paid your deductible, and those have been going up by 212%. Increasing the amount of money the patient must pay out of pocket before the insurance kicked in. In fact, deductibles increased by 4.5% in 2018 alone. And that's where people are pointing to, well, gee, where's this Affordable Care Act happening? I mean, what's the, how can you call this affordable? It's not.
No.
The thing is the idea for it to be affordable was somewhere down the road there was going to be some cost control involved here. Mm-hmm. But there was no, the battle over Affordable Care Act was so divisive that after it was all done, there was not going to be any working out the details or the problems between the Republicans and the Democrats after that ACA passed. The Republicans won way too much just by coming up with these fear tactics. I mean, they took back the House, they took back the Senate, they took back the presidency, based on, in a large part, well, Obama promised me I could keep my doctor, I could keep my health plan.
Well,
what sort of promise is that? I mean, that never happens. You're always shifting. I don't know where he.
I knew he was lying when he said that.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you saying that?
No, he was not lying.
He was too.
No, he was not. What he disallowed was the cheap, worthless plans that are crap.
Yeah, right.
And he made them not allowable under the Affordable Care Act. Ones that limit that have no mental health coverage.
Yeah, but he made no provision for the fact that an employer would have to keep, or that an insurance plan would have to maintain its coverage of a particular employer.
But they never
as soon
do
as
that.
Well, I know. So why did he say that?
I don't know. But
Why
I'm
didn't
not-
he
wait a minute, say that
you
again?
So he said to people, if you like your health insurance, you can keep it. When he didn't acknowledge that it is never the employee's choice
No.
to keep
Right.
or not to keep.
Right.
It's the insurance provider's
Right.
choice to
Right.
stay
And
with an
I
employer
think-
or what to offer
And
an
I think
employer.
maybe he just didn't understand. I don't know if he's ever worked with the health insurance companies before.
I
or,
don't think he was naive or stupid. I
don't
think he
know.
was trying to make a sales pitch,
Yeah.
and he was kind of saying, I'm not going to take it away from you, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you get to keep it.
That's right.
And he
right.
wasn't saying,
Yeah.
and don't
Yeah, but-
worry, I'm
but-
going to hold
Yeah,
their
yeah,
feet to the fire. These guys are not going to be able to back out of your employer.
But of
and-
course they would, and he still
Well,
had
I
insurance
know,
companies.
but I mean,
Yeah,
why?
indeed.
And plenty of intelligent people. I mean, a friend of mine who is highly educated and knows stuff that I couldn't dream of knowing, was rather insulted when I suggested that this person should have seen through the lie that Obama spoke, because it was so self-evident
yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
And
Well, because you're in the
well,
system.
no, but I mean, even if I weren't, I mean, really, if somebody said to you, if you like your car insurance, you can keep it, and yet, I know that I'm not the one who makes the decision in the car insurance industry as to who that particular company is going to insure. If that company decided they're not going to insure women between a certain age, who happen to drive a such and such car this many miles, and if I fit into that category, I wouldn't have any say over it.
Well, also in rural areas where we are, and maybe it's different in urban areas, but in rural areas where these arguments are being made, and where people are are increasingly they're the big red states in the middle of the country. There's only maybe one or two different insurance companies that are offering. It's not like
Right.
it's not like you have 10 different insurance companies you can
Right,
do.
and there's nobody making them
you got
stay next
Anthem
year.
or Blue Cross. Those are the two, or Blue Shield. Those are the two things you got. And so it's not like you have this huge list of folks who will cover you. It's like you have this little group or this little group, but sometimes they won't be the same little group.
Yeah, and if that particular company decides to pick up and walk off next year, there's nobody making them stay.
Yeah, if they don't negotiate
So
a
I could
contract
choose
with
to
a
keep
hospital.
you, but if you're walking out of my district, then
Yeah.
I can't keep you.
That's right.
And Obama made no provision to
Right.
to protect
Right.
consumers against the
Well,
abandonment of their insurance companies.
And this is part of the problem of starting in the middle and negotiating to the right. Is that's essentially, there was no public option, there was no single payer at the beginning of that negotiation. It was like, okay, we have to have insurance companies. Now, how do you want to negotiate? It's like, well, you've lost the game right there.
No,
the thing
yeah.
is that how can you? You just negotiated away your strongest point.
I mean, we could have had the Affordable Care Act back in '92 or '93, whenever it was. The Hillary
94,
Care was
yeah.
actually
Yeah,
looking
93,
like
right.
she might be making noises for having a single-payer system.
I
Those
know.
people got scared.
Yeah.
That's
Well-
when Heritage Foundation came up with the
Yeah,
ACA
yeah,
plan.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't know. We'll have an individual
Yeah,
mandate.
yeah.
Everybody will have
Yeah,
to
and-
buy
yeah.
private insurance.
Yeah, and let's run it through Massachusetts so we have a state model
well, I mean, that
to
took,
look at. right?
16
Yeah,
years, but
yeah. So it's been
Our side just caves all the time.
well, it starts that way. Well, but it is encouraging. What was Bernie's no more middle ground?
Yes.
it-
no middle ground on abortion, no middle ground on climate change, no middle ground on single payer, because
Yeah.
these are things you can't
Yeah.
middle ground on.
Right.
You have to say
They're
it's
absolute.
this way or your way. It's either our way or it's going to be your way.
Right.
And there's enough of us demanding it to be our way now.
Right.
Thank God for the under 40s,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been waiting for them for a long time.
Yeah. Well, there's still a lot of mobilization to be done, because
Sure.
right now.
Fortunately, they're all in debt.
Yeah.
They
Right
can't
now-
buy houses.
right-
They have
right-
no income,
Well,
and
right
they're
now,
angry.
right now, the corporate media is pushing a Biden ticket where I don't really see there being any groundswell. I don't see huge crowds or stadiums filling up for a Joe Biden candidacy.
No, but
He just
somehow
doesn't-
he's apparently in the polls
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
out with what 35% or
Yeah.
some
Well, the
crazy
thing is that, and what really needs to be looked at is what about the polls in the states that count? Like Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and California, because California is going to be like a March primary this time. So we're actually going to be making some
Right.
decisions here, and there's going to be some contesting for our votes here, and so we have a voice.
Well, but will the Democratic Party be astute enough to nominate someone that we can support?
Well-
What are we going to do if they don't?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I was just reading an article that was saying that the Democratic Congressional Committee, the ones who decide who's going to run for different offices for House of Representatives, that they do not want to have another Cortez.
No,
They do
But-
not
well,
want to
and
have
they've been telling people
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
primary,
Right.
Incumbents for
Right.
a
Yeah,
long
but-
time.
Right. But the thing
Whatever.
I remember 1968 when the Democratic Convention in Chicago, and they, didn't want to nominate anyone that was the tiniest bit liberal.
Right.
And when the students revolted, they marched them into Lake Michigan.
Well,
Were you there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that right? Oh my. Well, these are historical times. I mean, that was what 51 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And so
I imagine.
I imagine, yeah, I can remember back then. But those are the times we live in now. We have some really important choices to make, and we really have to let people know that time is up on these issues. We've been kicking the can down the road for so long on climate change. And well, abortion has just come up because of the Supreme Court, but
Well, they've been chipping away at it.
yeah,
for,
they have been chipping.
40
Yeah,
years.
I mean, look at Missouri now. It's like it's not going to even have a clinic. I mean, they're on the razor's edge of that, and Alabama and all these other conservative states that have been gerrymandered. I mean, this is their last.
They've been
stand.
creating undue burdens
Yeah.
all over the place. Yeah.
Indeed. So, but the one that really impacts everybody is healthcare.
Yes.
Because sooner or later, you're gonna, even me, I'm gonna go see a doctor.
The problem is, I mean, everybody doesn't need to go at the same time. So we have this rolling,
That's right.
disaster is the
That's
problem.
right.
But
I
yeah.
got medical care on Monday, Memorial Day.
Oh,
He had a surgical procedure.
you did.
Yeah, I did.
Was that planned? Was
No,
that
it wasn't planned.
Oh, so you didn't have to. Wow. And so on a holiday,
On a holiday.
big long line there, huh?
No, there was
Yeah.
no line.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
an ophthalmology clinic. It was totally empty,
Wow.
and with just me and the ophthalmologist.
Well, I am gonna schedule my next appointment for a holiday.
Yeah,
'Cause
right.
that
I couldn't
sounds
believe,
like the time to go. But
I couldn't believe it.
yeah.
So yeah, there's some energy going on right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about you mentioned AOC,
Uh-huh.
and something that she said that impressed me was that she's 29 years old. She says, my generation has never known the kind of prosperity that people of Nancy Pelosi's generation take for granted in
Right.
this society.
Right.
The prosperity of the 20th century is something that these 21st century
Right.
adults have never seen.
Right.
And they call it socialism if you have
Yeah.
to, but they want some of the things they know they could
Yeah.
have.
It was socialism when I went to college and only had to pay $12.50 a quarter to go to Davis. That's socialism. Right now, it costs $15,000 a year to go to Davis, and you don't even get out in 4 years. And so that means you're saddled with like $75,000 of debt,
Well, and
where what it cost me was like $3,000 and a scholarship. It
Yeah,
was like,
and you could have
that's
rented an
socialism.
apartment for $150
Right,
or
and
something.
Well,
then,
it was
right.
even, I went to undergraduate in 1959 to 1963. I paid zero tuition to one of the largest state universities in the country. Then I went to, a few years later, went to graduate school, and I was given a stipend.
Yeah.
I did have
Yeah.
to pay the tuition
Yeah.
out of the stipend, but I virtually paid nothing in
Yeah.
tuition.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are entitled don't realize that they are privileged. I think
there's that.
even
right. I can't believe that.
the older folks are saying, well, what about my Medicare? Well, what about my Social Security? Well, what I have to keep my job so I can keep my health care. Well, you're keeping your job. By your keeping your job, that young person is not getting a job. You're holding on to a job that somebody else could be taking. I mean, there are a lot of young people out, a lot of qualified, smart young people who can do a great job given the chance. But there are a lot of people who are
they do
clogging
need
up the back
training,
end.
and they ought to be able to get
A
it
lot of them have
without
grad degrees.
going into some sort of
Yeah.
serious debt.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff that it's not just all Bernie. I think Elizabeth Warren has some really good,
She has some great
proposals.
ideas, yeah.
Yeah, she has some great ideas, and so and it seems like there's a plan behind each one of them,
Yeah, she has a
which is
plan.
nice. She has a plan, which is good, and but and she's really bright and she's forceful
And she's been saying that for
Yeah.
a really, really
yeah,
long time.
Not as long as Bernie, but the thing
Oh,
is,
no,
is that she's
longer.
Yeah, longer.
Well-
Longer.
I think Bernie's older.
Yeah,
Well,
Bernie's
I don't know.
older. Bernie has, and Bernie has the socialistic, what's the word? Critique.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah.
has an
Yeah.
organized pattern of
Yeah.
thinking. Now
Yeah.
she'll deny she's a socialist.
Sure.
She's just a very heavily regulated capitalist.
Yeah. right.
But she has a pretty well thought out critique
Yeah.
as well. She just, I think she takes them more piecemeal. She has a
Right.
child care
Right.
plan and
Right.
an education
Yeah.
plan. Whereas I think for Bernie, it's more of a
It's more of a
holistic
movement. It's more of
piece,
it's more of a mind shift and saying, like what AOC would be thinking is, we're entitled to a different framework in which to work, and that Bernie and AOC folks are wanting to work on a more permissive framework where young people can thrive, where tuition is free. Or it's not free. It's just paid for by taxpayers. Nothing is free. The thing is that I didn't think of it as being free when I was going to college. I just sort of thought, well, this is a public school. It should be paid for by the public. And I was proud of going to a public school.
Well,
And
it
so
was.
that's what it is. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. But when you're paying $15,000 of your own private money to go to a public school, there's something the matter there. And the amount of money that goes into medical. I mean, a lot of the drugs that are developed that are being sold by these for-profit pharmaceutical companies, a lot of them have been developed by government
Publicly funded R&D,
public
absolutely.
right. And so the thing is, what they do is they just put their wrapper around it,
they do.
ship off the jobs to India, and they sell it to us for 10 times the price.
Yeah. Well, they do. They get these patents.
Yeah.
They're like gifted these patents that they have no reason to claim.
No, I mean the whole system has got to be looked at, and that's why a Bernie candidacy is more refreshing, is because I think he's looking at it from not so much, well, this little law has to be changed and this little law has to be changed. It's like you have to change the way you look at this system
Who
and
is
say,
this here
who is
for?
it serving? Is it serving people or is it serving profit? And obviously what we have now. I mean, you take a look at what we have in the presidency right now. It is so self-serving. If you can't see that, then you haven't been watching.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just such a self-serving show out there that everything that happens. I mean, on the cover of this Connections is talking about Iran and we're talking about Venezuela. And if those conflicts aren't fueled by a self-serving preservation to win in 2020, I don't know what is. I mean, that's exactly what's going on there. I mean, it's like just change the discussion. Let's get it so that I look like I'm a leader, and we'll just move on. Nothing to see. Yesterday is so yesterday.
Well, I think there was some spite too with the scuttling of the Iranian treaty.
Well, but
he wanted to take Obama's accomplishment away from him.
but it's also keeping the boogeyman on the shelf there.
Oh, sure.
That you can say, oh yeah, if I ever get in a tough jam, I can concoct some sort of
Wag the
so
dog.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
I
what
mean,
one looks like he's working on that now.
Yes,
he's,
sure.
He's
Yes.
are we going to? Is he going to be able to manage a war before 2020?
Yeah,
It's
right.
pretty
Well,
questionable.
the thing is, he wants to get it as close to 2020 as possible because then he can look like the hero. I mean, look at George W. Bush.
Well,
After
yeah.
9/11, I mean, that guy, before 9/11, that guy was toast. He was not going to get reelected.
Right.
I mean, he was a loser. And that afterwards, he was just like Mr. Hero,
Well, and even if he wasn't, you don't want to. You got to back him because.
Well, that's
you
what
got-
the-
Yeah, you
That's-
don't,
that- well-
you don't want to switch horses in the middle of the
yeah,
stream.
Exactly. Yeah. And on and on.
I don't know,
Yada,
maybe you
yada,
do.
yada.
Well, that is that is
I did, but
Yeah.
We
yeah,
did.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, I
and-
wasn't switching.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. It never got on that horse to start
Yeah.
with. So anyway, so we have. So for Medicare for all, I think we're moving forward. I think it's still a
it's
you know,
viable.
it's viable.
It's
moving
in the
forward.
zeitgeist.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is on the table.
Yeah, and so we just have to keep on
have to
mentioning
fight.
it, keep
We have
on
to fight.
referring people to read their
have
previous foreign
all
books.
of our listeners need to call their relatives in South Carolina and
Yes.
Alabama and have them understand
Yeah.
what-
that a better world is possible, that they don't have to cling on to this sinking life raft.
yeah.
Because I think that's how we end up getting the candidates we get, is because we're worried that oh God, we have to have Hillary Clinton because we can't afford to have Bernie
yeah.
Sanders because I mean, God, that would just be too scary. So let's get the sure thing, or the Al Gore instead of somebody else. I mean, the thing is that we
That failed strategy.
Yeah.
Over and over and over
and
again.
over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Let's
it just
keep doing it. See
Yeah.
if it'll work this time.
But the
Yeah.
Republicans have no problem, nominating the most extreme nutcase, and sometimes they win.
Well,
Oh.
and every time we talk
What are you
about
saying?
about nominating someone progressive, they throw George McGovern in our face and they tell us that he lost in a landslide. But the truth is, yeah, he lost, 49 out of 50
Yeah, he
states
did.
or whatever, but it was like a 49-51%. He came close. In
Yeah.
a lot
He
of
d-
states.
he just lost
came
every-
up
he
short
just lost-
in
he
every
just lost
single
every
one.
state.
But
And- Yeah.
he would have been a way better president.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
he
and,
really
and,
would have.
and we do have
He was
to
an awesome candidate.
yeah, the problem is that there is a media out there that does not want radical solutions or off
Right.
the
Yeah,
solutions
that-
that are outside of the box.
It seems like the media is liberal, but they really they haven't been willing to say the word single payer
No.
until just recently.
No.
Why
and
do you
and
think
then,
it seems that the media are
well, I don't know. They kind of they support some of the liberal ideas.
It's
and
all money. It's
Like
all
what?
money.
Yeah. Well, but
Who
they,
pays-
they,
who
they-
pays-
they- I don't know.
They're
Well,
not even liberal.
Who pays the commercials for commercial radio and
Right.
TV?
Yeah,
I mean,
pharmaceuticals.
I mean,
Right.
are those reporters low income? Are those anchors low income?
No.
Are any of the people who run those news programs low income? No, they're all high income people who want to keep their jobs, who like the perks of looking like they're powerful. They're talking to powerful people. They hang around with people who are also well off, and so.
Well, and their bosses,
Yeah,
the
and-
chair persons
and they want to
of
move
the
up.
networks
They're
are extremely
ambitious.
wealthy people.
All these people are ambitious, and so yeah, I mean
It's not like they want to tax themselves.
No, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I remember when they were first interviewing Bernie, they, bent themselves double to make him say that having single payer would cause taxes to go up.
Yes.
And I mean, not
End
giving
of
him,
story.
Of course.
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
giving him an opportunity to say,
That's all we need to hear.
Yeah, taxes up, deductibles down, co-pays down, premiums down, 3 downs, 1 up. Okay, we win. So, but then even PBS, which is sponsored by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which relies on congressional support, which is pretty much had been run by
Lobbyists.
Republicans. The thing is the PBS also doesn't want to bite the hand that feeds them either. Take a look at who are some of their underwriters. I mean, you have some underwriters who are pretty darn conservative. I mean, ExxonMobil, Archer Daniel Midland, all these companies that are very definitely unenvironmental. I mean, you're not going to see a whole lot of stuff about glyphosate or a bunch of. I mean, Frontline once in a while will run something, but but it overall, most of the media you read, except for connections here, is beholden to deep-pocketed folks. And so, just be logical about it. I don't think you have to be socialist at all to understand that. I mean, who pays the piper
Calls the tune.
calls the tune. Is that right?
You're a musician.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
How that works.
That's right. I'll play for some pretty despicable people as long as they pay me money. But, no, I play trombone. That's right. No, I'm not really a musician. But so anyway, so good. I think we've had a nice discussion of Medicare for All.
Thank you, Bruce.
Kathy Mathis.
Can I make one more plug for my article?
Sure. Yeah. What is your article?
It's the latest edition of JAMA, May 31st, 2019, and the writers are Steffi Woolhandler and David Himmelstein.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is called Medicare for All, Healthcare Economics Insurance Payment.
And this is the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Yes.
What day?
May 31st.
May 31st. Off the press.
This year, right?
Excellent.
Hot off the press.
Good deal. Well, it's slowly moving. Thanks so much, you guys. It's good time.
Thank you.